I want to talk about something that I know from memory. And if you actually look at some of the videos on YouTube or anything, this is not really an important subject, but it kind of is an important subject in a way because it illustrates two different things. One is that um, laws, when they come about, they don't necessarily start to get enforced right away. And another thing is people's memories tend to not be the same going from person to person. In other words, person's memories aren't necessarily what really reflect what happened in reality. And there's actually a third thing. Corporations will affect how laws are applied. Now, this gas station is in Clifton, New Jersey. I remember this when I was like 17 years old, or before I was 17 years old. Used to hang out over here, and this was on a corner. And back then, the old guy, he had like a little Willys Jeep over here. Basically, you can see where this gray car over here is parked. He had a little Willys Jeep over here that was probably from like World War II, and it had a plow on it. It used to plow like the Sunoco area when it was all snowed in. And there's three bays. That's the same thing. And here's like the little office space. We used to hang out in there sometimes. Matter of fact, one time I remember I put a clutch in one of my cars, and the old guy was coming by just when we were finishing up. He goes, "Oh, what are you using the bay for?" It was that night. And he said, "Yeah, we're just adjusting the throttle cable." But, so a friend of mine, he actually, a couple friends of mine, they worked in this gas station. One guy, I remember he used to pump the gas, and, he'd always pump gas with, while he was smoking a cigarette. And he'd have a cigarette right in his mouth. Like, in other words, the gas, where you'd be pumping the gas, and like you pull down a license plate in the back of the car in the older cars, and the filler neck would be there, and he'd be crouched down with a cigarette in his mouth. He goes, "Yeah, as long as the embers don't touch these, smoke. What do you call it? The fumes coming from the gas, it will be no problem." There was all kinds of stuff that wasn't like super safety conscious back then. But I remember, so in '72, I was 17. Now this law with the New Jersey that said you cannot pump your own gas. That's supposedly what I think was passed in 1947. Now, all the time I was growing up, I don't remember that law. I mean, there was no law like that, as far as I knew, right? Now, maybe the women knew there was a law like that because they would go in there and they would have, somebody pump the gas for them. But we never had somebody pump gas for our cars. And this was back in the day when they had all the muscle cars out there and stuff like that. Guys are doing their, they were into cars. This is the boomer generation, right? So, I always pumped my own gas. I never had somebody pump the gas for me, which is freaking stupid, in my opinion. So I got out of New Jersey in '82. I went in the Marine Corps, and then I remember coming up there sometimes by car from like Lejeune or something. I still be pumping my own gas, and I was overseas, and then I came back, and in '95, '96, I was up there in the wintertime. I was pumping my own gas. Then I came up there and from Florida like in 2000 and 2003. And all of a sudden I was saying, what's this crap? Well, I remember like when I was there in '95, '96 in the wintertime, I had my bike and it was cold, remember that? But the guy was like, I was pumping gas in the motorcycle, and the guy looked at me kind of weird. He goes, "What? I know how you guys are. You don't want anybody pumping your gas and get it on your gas tank." I said, "Yeah, well, whatever." I didn't think, and then there was another guy that kind of yelled at me when I was pumping the gas in the El Camino. I was like, "Yeah, what the fuck?" I was like, "What's the matter with this guy?" And I didn't think nothing about it because I never knew there was a law against you couldn't pump your own gas. Then I said, "When the hell did that start?" I started finding out like in 2003 when I was up there that you couldn't pump your own gas. So I'm like, when the hell did that come about? What kind of dumb law is that? Then I said it was 1947. And I said, wait a minute. I remember like my father, all my friends, we never had somebody at the gas station pump the gas for us. Well, you know what happened? Now you look at this gas station here, right? It's got three bays, right? You see the lifts on it, stuff like that. We used to hang out. This is the same gas station from like, I don't know when this thing was built, but it was there definitely. It was there for a while in 1972, right? But you see, it's a full service gas station. It's not just some chain stores, 7-Eleven, Wawa, whatever the hell it is, Circle K. I don't know if they got Circle K up there in New Jersey, but they got a lot of different places that are just like, convenience stores. They sell you cigarettes, coffee, junk food, and they don't really have any. They don't sell like do tires or something. This place had like, they do the tires and stuff. They do a lot of junk. They didn't have a machine shop, but they did a lot of work on the cars too. But that's how the gas stations back then, they were full service stations. There'd be a mechanic there. They'd all have tires and stuff like that. Windshield wipers. They'd put them on your car. Like, not major stuff most of the time, but they'd have everything. In other words, they're independently owned and operated, even though it was Exxon or Shell or BP or whatever, Sunoco. They were independently operated. And what I think was, when the big chain stores started gobbling up all these places, that's when some lawyers looked into the books. And they also did this because maybe liability reasons, possibly. But I think one of the main reasons they did this was when they say they had this out here as a 7-Eleven or a Wawa, right? If they had to have people, they were basically afraid of some kind of liability issue. That's what I assume what it was. So if somebody was pumping their own gas and something happened, the big chain store would have a problem if there was a gas spill or something. That's what I think. Because the law was on the books from 1947, but I never even knew it was a law. And like I say, I was I was living there, well, I was driving from 72 to 82, and I was gone after 82, but I was still popping back in there every once in a while. And I didn't even know it was a law until like 2003. And then, but it was a law since 1947, but it wasn't being enforced in the 70s and 80s and probably most of the 90s, and definitely not in the 60s and 50s. I remember like back in the 60s, my father had his car and he pumped his own gas, man. He'd get out there and pump his own gas. He wouldn't have somebody go over there and say, I got to pump the gas for me or something. He would pump his gas. So it was like, but the law was that you could not do that. So what was going on here? Why did it really change? And I can't really tell you 110% for sure, but I think what really did change was that you got these big corporations changed what a gas station was. In other words, it was no longer an independently operated sole proprietor full service gas station. It was part of a big conglomerate convenience store nationwide and all this garbage, or basically multi-state, region-wide or whatever, whereby it wasn't just one person out, owning the place. And now it's like, the lawyers list to look in the books and stuff like that. I don't know why they got all bent out of shape about that, but it sure as hell was a law. Okay, it was on the books for 1947, but I could tell you for decades, it was completely ignored. Now, I'm assuming, though, the women probably, for the most part, probably were under the impression that, it was the law maybe, or the fact that there were women, if they went and drove the car. But you got to remember, even in the 50s, there probably wasn't that many women driving like there are today, or even in the 60s. There wasn't like, it wasn't like an automatic thing. It was quite a bit different back then. And, but it's one of those things where I think about all these rules we got, and it's like once the big corporations get involved, there could be a lot of rules on the books that we don't even know about. This is what I hate about big corporations and these pencil pushing pieces of garbage out there. They will pull out the fine print on everything, and they just basically restrict your movement to breathe. And you look at this thing. Look at this thing. This looks like a Rubicon with a bunch of rust on it. Look at that. That's freaking New Jersey, all right. But Yeah, basically this station's been here quite a while then, So just got to pick this out because I said to myself, man, I'm 100% sure of this. But if you look at videos on anywhere, I remember trying to dig this up one time a few years ago. When I knew about, when I started finding out that this was a new law, not a new law, it was a law that was being enforced that was an old law, but it wasn't being enforced. I started saying, when did this come about? But there's nobody that talks about this. It's not like it's a big deal in itself, but what makes it a big deal is how they could tell you, well, it's always been that way. In reality, it wasn't always that way, but how many different things are going to be like that in the future? How about firecrackers on the 4th of July? I didn't really look up too much of the laws on that, but I think like in a lot of states, they don't like, you might find a law where they're illegal. I think they're even in Florida, like they'll probably tell you can't do this and you can't do that. I think even down here, I know in New Jersey, they probably got way more strict laws on fireworks. But guess what? People do it all the time. It's like they don't really enforce it. And people, when they don't enforce it, people think it's not a law. Right? It's sort of like when they went down a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit in Arizona. The whole state said, the heck with the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, and the cars are going by 80 miles an hour right by the state troopers, and the state troopers were ordered basically by the governor to, oh, the hell with that, we'll let them drive whatever they want. This is Arizona. That was way back. So, but yeah, I remember this also because at this station, back in 73, they had the embargo, and we had the even plates on certain days and the odd plates on other days with 10 gallons a week limit. And boy, that was a mess. But you never know, man. But this is what kind of bugs me about the whole thing is like they got a version, like the big corporate media will tell you what you're supposed to think. This is where there's actually a danger even with this stuff where generations later on they'll tell you like the boomers were about this, the boomers were about that. In reality, even a fringe group of the boomers way back in the 60s, if you look back at the hippie movement, I don't remember seeing too many hippies when I was growing up, but it makes you look like they're all over the place. But, most people knew that was a lot of BS anyway. Like a guy would come along with a tan leather fringe jacket and some incense and long hair and with a peace sign. He knows all the ways and he's going to fix everything because he just got this whole attitude. But you know what? They just changed the styles, and you got a new freaking idiot out there right now that's telling you everything that they know all the ways. It's the same old garbage, the same old spin. But for the most part, people are pretty much too busy to be getting involved in all that stupid garbage. But, they paint generations a certain way. They paint history a certain way. They don't tell you a lot of stuff. And, when you're looking at this platform on YouTube, you look at how heavily censored it is. I look at a lot of videos, and I look at a lot of stuff, a lot of it on fast forward, just because I want to sometimes just get the information. But I look at a lot of this stuff, and I say to myself, man, these guys got a lot of spin on this stuff. It's really garbage. And it's like, it's basically the whole thing, the whole platform has become a propaganda tool. But this is another, indication just how, this is a small thing. It's something that's not politically sensitive. But, reason I'm bringing it up, just apply this also to how politics and world events have happened. If they're if they're hiding this, oh, it's always been that way. Yeah, maybe the law was always there, but it sure as hell wasn't enforced for many decades. How many other things do you think they're lying about, or they're just, diverting attention away from what the truth is? Well, and I'll just leave you with this thought. I forgot who this guy was, but he was one of the heads of the CIA, and he said that our mission will be complete. Part if I'm paraphrasing him, our mission will be complete when everything that the public thinks is truth, the general public thinks is truth, will be all misinformation and wrong. So This is why I don't kind of like social media in some ways. It's kind of like a bunch of garbage, and they control who gets heard and they control who doesn't get heard. And anyway, just a small thing, but pay attention to like where you're getting the information from. And a lot of times, the most sensational information is basically the most wrong. And sometimes the things that are big, they're under the radar. There's your truth. So anyway, have at it.